You don't belong here." It tore through the marble-lined lobby of the downtown branch like glass shattering on tile. Heads turned, phones lifted. A silence broke into murmurs. At the counter, a man in a pale blue shirt leaned forward, veins rising on his temple, his finger stabbing the air as if it could pierce skin. His face was twisted with something uglier than anger certainty. He wasn't whispering. He wanted the whole bank to hear. Across the glass partition, Marcus Reed didn't move. A plain white t-shirt, dark jeans, no designer logos, no watch sparkling under the fluorescent lights. He didn't look like a millionaire. That was the point. Calm eyes fixed on his phone, he pressed it tighter to his ear, his jaw clenched. "Fire them now," he said. Low, steady, not for the room, but for the line open on the other end. A ripple went through the waiting area. A woman in a gray blazer crossed her arms, lips curling in amusement. Behind her, two customers shifted uneasily, one whispering, "This is getting bad." Another client, younger, pulled out his phone and hit record, the red circle glowing like a quiet alarm, but Marcus didn't blink. His voice was iron wrapped in calm. The teller behind the desk smirked, as though humiliation was part of her paycheck. "Sir, this section is for real clients. Please leave before we escalate." The escalation had already begun. Marcus's stillness wasn't weakness. It was a pause before the storm. He had seen this scene before 20 years ago at a different counter. A younger man in the same plain clothes, told to step aside, while others passed freely. The sting of being erased had carved itself into memory. That scar was the reason he now stood here, phone in hand, holding more power than anyone in the building could guess. A man in line muttered loud enough for others to hear, "They always say that when they think you don't belong." His wife nodded, her grip tightening on her purse strap. The bank manager stepped closer, arms folded, face glowing with self-righteousness. "Sir, this is your last warning. We don't tolerate frauds." Fraud. That word cracked against the air like a whip. Customers gasped. The tension turned from awkward to electric. And still, Marcus said nothing more than 3 words. "Run my name." The room seemed to freeze. "Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change. And we're glad you're here. Now, back to Marcus." The young man with the phone zoomed in. The older woman in the gray blazer smirked wider. The teller reached for the landline receiver, dialing with shaking fingers. And Marcus? He just stood there, anchored like stone, voice calm as he repeated into the phone, 7 minutes. That's all it takes. 7 minutes earlier, the branch had been quiet. The hum of printers, the faint buzz of fluorescent lights, a marble floor polished to a shine that almost dared you to scuff it. Into that hush walked Marcus Reed unannounced, alone, and deliberately unremarkable. A white t-shirt, dark jeans, scuffed sneakers. No Rolex, no tailored suit, no corporate entourage trailing behind him. Just a slim phone in his hand and a folder tucked under his arm. To anyone looking, he was just another customer trying his luck at the wrong counter. That was exactly what he wanted. Because Marcus wasn't there for vanity. He wasn't there to be recognized. He was there for a test. The test had begun the second he stepped inside. The teller's glance, quick, dismissive, had told him enough. The hesitation before greeting him, the forced politeness stretched thin over suspicion. It was the same pattern he'd seen since his 20s, the look that said, "You don't belong in this space." He'd carried those looks like scars. At 22, when he tried to open his first investment account, the banker had laughed at the balance, asking if he was joking. At 25, when he signed his first property deal, the broker demanded 3 IDs just to be sure. And now, at 41, worth over $3 billion, the tone hadn't changed. He knew it would happen again. That's why he came dressed down. No armor of status, no signal of wealth, just himself. The irony was sharp. This wasn't just a bank. This was his bank. Reed Capital owned 34% of its stock, making him the largest shareholder in the entire institution. The branch he walked into today downtown, glass walls gleaming, staff in crisp blue shirts operated under his oversight. The very people smirking at him worked on his payroll, and still they didn't see him. Or maybe they didn't want to. At the far corner, a woman in a gray blazer watched with folded arms, her smirk widening as the tension grew. Two men near the line exchanged knowing glances, one raising his phone, whispering, "They're about to throw him out." Marcus didn't flinch. He wasn't surprised. That was the point. He laid the folder gently on the counter. Inside, paperwork authorizing a transaction most clients would never dream of, a transfer that could wipe this branch's entire weekly balance sheet in one move. But he didn't announce it. He didn't need to. Instead, he leaned forward just enough for the teller to hear him clearly. "Run my name," he repeated. The teller scoffed. "Sir, we don't have time for stunts." "Two." But Marcus stayed still, his voice low enough to steady the tremors in the room. "You'll regret it if you don't." Outside, clouds were rolling over the city, shadows pressing against the glass walls. Inside, the storm had already arrived. The teller's voice sharpened, each syllable clipped like a blade. "Sir, people like you come in here all the time. Fake documents, fake cards, we don't fall for scams." Triton. The words hung heavy, deliberate, loud enough for every customer in the lobby to catch them. A few heads turned. A mother with a stroller pulled her child closer. Two college students waiting in line exchanged smirks as if the entertainment had arrived. Marcus didn't react. He slid the folder across the counter, calm, precise, as if handling glass. "Run my name," he said again, voice steady. The teller didn't even look at the papers. She leaned back in her chair, arms crossed, chin lifted in defiance. "This isn't a walk-in center. This section is for verified clients. You need to leave before I call security." And then the manager appeared, pressed navy suit, gold tie pin, the kind of posture that announces authority before a word is spoken. His shoes clicked against marble as he approached, echoing like a verdict. He didn't glance at Marcus's documents. He didn't even ask a question. He went straight for dismissal. "Sir, your account isn't verified. You're wasting everyone's time. I suggest you step aside." A ripple ran through the lobby. One man muttered, "Fraud," under his breath. Another whispered, "This happens all the time." From the side, a woman in a gray blazer laughed softly, shaking her head. "Honestly, look at him," she said, not bothering to lower her voice. "Jeans and a t-shirt, walking in here like he owns the place." The irony cut sharper than any insult. Marcus stood tall, unshaken. His eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger but in focus. He'd seen this performance before. The arrogance, the false authority, the assumption that prejudice was protocol. The manager stepped closer, lowering his voice just enough to feel threatening. "We can do this the easy way or the hard way. Your choice." Marcus didn't flinch. He spoke into his phone, low, calm, measured. "Clock it. 2 minutes in." The words unsettled the teller. She frowned. "Who are you talking to?" But Marcus didn't answer. He didn't need to. At the far corner, a young man lifted his phone higher, red light blinking. He whispered to the person beside him, "They're really about to drag him out." The manager noticed and snapped, "Turn that off. This isn't a show." But it was too late. The room had shifted. The tension was no longer private. It was public. It was on record. And then came the trigger. The teller shoved the folder back across the counter with a sharp flick, sending papers sliding to the floor. "Enough! Security!" she barked. The word cracked like thunder. A hush fell over the room. Every eye turned to Marcus, and he remained still, calm, anchored. He picked up one sheet from the floor, brushed it clean, and said quietly, "You just made the last mistake of your career." Papers scattered at his feet. A few drifted like tired leaves across the marble floor before settling flat, silent witnesses to a louder crime. The teller leaned back, arms crossed, smirk fixed like armor. The manager stood just behind her, chest out, chin high, the posture of someone convinced he had already won. But Marcus didn't bend. He didn't scramble for the documents. He didn't raise his voice. He simply crouched, gathered one page between careful fingers, smoothed the crease, and placed it back on the counter. Calm, controlled. "Run my name," he repeated, voice even softer this time, so soft it made the silence sharper. The room shifted. Customers near the velvet rope line leaned forward, waiting for the explosion that never came. Instead, they got stillness. And that stillness was heavier than shouting. The manager scoffed. "You're not verified. This isn't up for debate." His words were louder now, as if volume could disguise the cracks in his certainty. Marcus didn't look at him. His gaze stayed fixed on the desk, on the teller who refused to meet his eyes. A muscle in her jaw twitched. At the far corner, A young woman whispered to her friend, "He's not even angry." Her voice trembled with something like admiration, something like fear. A man 3 seats down muttered, "That's what's bothering them. He's too calm." The tension thickened, wrapping the lobby in invisible rope. Phones tilted higher. Red recording lights blinked like warning signals. The whole space felt like a courtroom, and Marcus's silence was the gavel. He lifted his phone again, pressed it to his ear. His voice barely carried, but the words were clear. 3 minutes in. Maintain log. The teller frowned. What log? Marcus didn't answer. He didn't need to. His composure was answer enough. The manager slammed a hand on the counter. The sound echoed, sharp, desperate. "You don't dictate terms here." Marcus blinked slowly, then straightened, his presence steady, immovable. He didn't match force with force. He let their noise hang in the air, unchallenged, until the weight of it turned back on them. Customers were whispering now, the tone shifting from curiosity to unease. Why isn't he fighting back? Why isn't he leaving? Who is this man? The gray blazer woman rolled her eyes, arms still crossed, muttering loud enough to be heard. Frauds always act calm. It's part of the con. Marcus turned his head slightly, just enough for his eyes to meet hers. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The look unflinching, deliberate, was enough to silence her smirk for the first time. And in that silence, the branch trembled. The silence broke with a small click. A phone camera lit up, its red dot glowing like an ember in the dim air of the branch. Keith, a young tech entrepreneur in sneakers and a hoodie, raised the device just above his chest, pretending at first to check messages. But the lens was pointed squarely at the counter. "Don't," whispered his friend beside him. Keith shook his head. "People need to see this." Across the lobby, a woman in her late 20s clutched her handbag tighter, lips pressed so hard they whitened. She wasn't filming, not yet, but her eyes never left Marcus. Her whisper carried, fragile but firm. "This isn't right." The teller heard it. She snapped her gaze toward the woman, snapping, "Mind your own business." But that only drew more eyes. A man in a gray suit near the coffee station raised his brows. "She's not wrong," he muttered, voice low but audible enough to ripple outward. The manager turned sharply. "Everyone calm down. This man is not a client. He is attempting fraud." Fraud. Again. That word kept striking the air like a hammer, and each time it fell, more people flinched. Marcus didn't respond. He stood steady, hands resting lightly on the counter, gaze fixed forward. His silence turned the lobby into a stage, and the witnesses were no longer passive, they were participants. The young woman with the handbag finally found her voice. She stepped forward a half step, her tone trembling but loud enough to carry. "He gave you his name. He gave you his documents. And you threw them on the floor." A hush followed. Even the teller froze. The manager tried to recover. "Ma'am, you don't understand." But she cut him off, voice sharper now. "No, you don't understand. We all saw what you did, and some of us are recording." All at once, the quiet hum of hidden phones became obvious. Small clicks, subtle red lights. Half a dozen devices were raised now, each capturing the moment from a different angle. The teller's smirk faltered. She hissed under her breath, "Turn those off, or you'll be escorted out too." Marcus finally moved. He turned his head, eyes settling on Keith with the phone. For the first time, he spoke louder, clear, and measured. "No, keep recording if you choose. But remember, justice isn't made on screens. It's made in this room." Keith blinked, his phone wobbling. Then he steadied his grip. Understood. The crowd shifted. The atmosphere no longer belonged to the staff. It belonged to the witnesses. And Marcus, still calm, still silent at the center, had turned strangers into an audience. The manager's jaw tightened. The whispers, the phones, the quiet defiance, it was slipping from his control. He squared his shoulders, as if posture alone could restore authority. "Enough," he snapped, voice slicing across the room. "This man is not a client. He is wasting everyone's time, and this disruption ends now." The teller exhaled in relief, emboldened by her superior. She gestured toward the documents Marcus had placed back on the counter. "Anyone can print these. They're worthless." She flicked them with 2 fingers like they were trash. Gasps broke from the line. One older woman shook her head. A younger man whispered, "They didn't even read them." The gray blazer woman smirked wider, as though the humiliation confirmed her worldview. "Honestly," she said to no one in particular, "look at him. If he really belonged here, he wouldn't be dressed like that. That sentence landed heavier than the rest. A murmur of discomfort spread through the crowd. One man lowered his phone slightly, muttering, "That's not professional. That's personal." The manager ignored it. He stepped closer to Marcus, lowering his voice to a tone laced with contempt but loud enough to carry. "This section is reserved for clients with verified assets. You're nothing more than a distraction. Step aside, or security will remove you." Marcus didn't move. His gaze steady, his breathing even. He let the insult hang in the air until the weight of it pressed back on the manager. The silence made the man angrier. He slammed the counter with his palm, the sharp crack making a few customers flinch. "Do you hear me? You don't belong here." The words echoed the same words that had opened this confrontation. They rang louder now, amplified by the phones recording every syllable. Marcus finally spoke, calm but cutting. "I hear you." The manager blinked, thrown by the restraint. Marcus leaned just slightly closer, his voice dropping low but firm. "And in 7 minutes, so will the board." The line rippled again. Whispers turned into gasps. A woman near the back murmured, "The board?" The manager forced a laugh, brittle and sharp. "Bluffing won't save you. Security's on its way." The teller smirked. "They'll drag him out. Happens all the time." But this time, the witnesses weren't silent. The young woman with the handbag spoke again, louder now, anger shaking her voice. "Happens all the time? That's the problem." Keith, still recording, added, "Yeah, this isn't just about him. This is about how you treat people." For the first time, the manager's confidence cracked. His eyes darted to the phones, then back to Marcus. "Turn those off," he barked, desperation leaking into his tone. But no one moved. The red lights only glowed brighter. And Marcus, calm as stone, simply said, "I told you to run my name." The lobby felt like it was holding its breath. Then the teller snapped. With one sharp motion, she swept Marcus's documents off the counter. Papers fluttered through the air, scattering across the marble like discarded confetti. The sound was soft, but the insult was loud. "Fraud," she spat. "You're wasting our time." Gasps erupted. A man near the velvet rope muttered, "She didn't just do that." A woman clutched her chest, eyes wide. Phones lifted higher, recording every sheet that drifted to the floor. Marcus bent down slowly, gathered one page with deliberate care, and placed it back on the counter. He didn't speak. He didn't flinch. His calm was the sharpest contrast to their chaos. The manager seized the moment, his voice booming across the lobby. "Security! Now!" The word cracked like thunder. From the far hallway, the heavy steps of a guard echoed closer. Black uniform, radio clipped to his shoulder, badge shining under the fluorescent lights. His eyes narrowed as he approached, already sizing Marcus up like a problem to be removed. "Sir," the manager barked, pointing, "escort him out. He's trespassing." The guard nodded, moving with the confidence of authority unquestioned. But the witnesses stirred. Keith, still holding his phone, stepped forward slightly. "Wait, he didn't do anything." "Dad," the young woman with the handbag added, louder now, her voice trembling with both fear and fire. "He gave you documents. You threw them on the floor, and now you're calling him a fraud?" "That's not policy, that's profiling." The guard hesitated. His eyes flicked toward the crowd, then back to the manager. "Is this confirmed?" "Yes," the manager snapped. "I said escort him out." The teller folded her arms, smirking. Finally, phones clicked, murmurs spread. A man near the back whispered, "They're really going to drag him out." Marcus finally straightened, his presence steady, unshaken. He looked at the guard, not with fear, not with anger, but with something colder, certainty. "Touch me," he said, voice calm but cutting, "and this branch will collapse before you finish the shift." The words hung heavy. The guard froze mid-step. The crowd erupted in hushed gasps. The manager scoffed. "Empty threats! Get him out!" Tabarien. But Marcus lifted his phone, pressed it back to his ear. His tone was low, controlled, absolute. 5 minutes in. Escalation logged. Activate next phase. The line went quiet, the weight of those words settling like storm clouds. The guard stepped back, uncertainty flickering across his face. The witnesses leaned closer, phones steady, eyes wide. And in that suspended moment, the branch no longer belonged to its staff. It belonged to the silence Marcus commanded. The manager's command still echoed, "Get him out!" but no one moved. Not the guard, not the teller, not even the customers frozen in half-breaths. Marcus lifted his phone higher, his voice calm enough to make the tension feel louder. Activate Protocol 5. Begin audit logging. Flag every word spoken in the last 5 minutes. On the other end, a crisp voice answered instantly. Confirmed, sir. Audit is live. Branch staff identifiers are locked. Continue. The guard froze mid-step, his eyes darting from Marcus to the manager. Audit? He muttered under his breath. The manager's face reddened. Don't listen to him. He's bluffing. But Keith, still recording, whispered to the young woman beside him, that didn't sound like a bluff. The teller leaned forward, smirking, though her voice cracked slightly. Sir, you can call whoever you want. This is still our branch. Marcus turned his gaze toward her. Calm. Level. Cutting without volume. No, it's mine. The words struck the lobby like a bell. People glanced at each other, whispers flaring. Did he say, his? The manager laughed, brittle, desperate. Your branch? Don't make me... Marcus interrupted, voice like steel wrapped in silk. Your system is already pulling your compliance history. Every biased phrase, every complaint ignored, every violation buried. You have 2 minutes before corporate is on this line. The guard took a step back. His radio crackled, static filling the pause. From the corner, the woman in the gray blazer shifted, her smirk faltering for the first time. Wait, she muttered almost to herself. He sounds serious. The young woman with the handbag spoke again, louder, firmer now. He's not lying. I've seen that kind of confidence before. That's not someone begging for service. That's someone who already owns the room. Keith nodded, his phone steady. Yeah, he's not here for approval. He's here for accountability. The teller swallowed hard, the bravado slipping. She glanced at the manager, but his jaw was locked, sweat forming at his hairline. Marcus pressed the phone closer to his ear. Log incident under code black. Escalate to board-level review. Logged, came the voice on the other end. Board will be alerted within 90 seconds. Phones rose higher. Murmurs thickened. A low hum filled the lobby, not from the lights or the machines, but from people realizing the ground was shifting beneath their feet. Marcus stood tall, eyes sweeping the room, not with rage, not with triumph, but with the certainty of a man who had been here before and chosen silence until the right moment. And now, the moment had arrived. The lobby was a taut wire, humming with whispers, red recording lights glowing like watchful eyes. The guard shifted uneasily, his hand hovering near his radio but never touching it. The teller bit her lip, smirk gone, replaced by something closer to doubt. And then Marcus spoke not to the phone, not to the manager, but to the room. My name, he said evenly, is Marcus Reed. The words landed without flourish, quiet but undeniable. No one reacted at first. The name floated there, unrecognized by some, half-remembered by others. He let the silence stretch, let curiosity simmer. Then he added, CEO of Reed Capital, majority shareholder of this bank. The effect was instant. Gasps, sharp and audible. A woman dropped her purse. Keith's phone dipped before jerking back up, the screen trembling in his hands. The manager's face drained of color. That's impossible. Marcus's gaze locked on him, unblinking. Check your system. The teller fumbled at her keyboard, hands suddenly clumsy. She typed, eyes darting between Marcus and the monitor. And then her mouth fell open. It's true, she whispered, voice shaking. Executive level. Owner clearance. The crowd erupted. Murmurs turned into open exclamations. Oh my God, he owns it? Wait, he's the CEO? The woman in the gray blazer took a step back, her smirk collapsing into horror. She whispered, barely audible, no. I said that in front of him. Keith zoomed in, whispering to his camera, you're seeing this live. The man they called a fraud owns the bank. Take. The manager tried to salvage dignity, words spilling out too fast. Sir, if there's been a misunderstanding, we can't... Marcus cut him off, voice low, precise. You didn't misunderstand. You decided. You judged. And you acted. The silence that followed was heavier than shouting. He turned slightly, addressing the witnesses now. This is why I came in plain clothes. Not to test wealth, but to test dignity. And you all saw the result. The guard lowered his gaze. The teller's hands trembled. The manager's throat worked, but no words emerged. Marcus lifted his phone again. 6 minutes in. Confirm identity broadcast to board. Confirmed, the crisp voice replied. The lobby exhaled all at once. The ground had shifted. The power flipped. The man they tried to erase had just drawn the curtain back, and the entire room saw who was really standing in front of them. Marcus Reed, CEO, owner, the man they'd called a fraud. The teller's whisper still echoed, executive-level owner clearance. It spread like fire through the lobby, igniting disbelief, shame, awe. Phones tilted higher. Screens glowed brighter. Keith's live-stream chat scrolled in a blur. No way. This is insane. He owns the place. The manager's face went pale as chalk. His gold tie pin gleamed against the sweat beading at his collar. His mouth opened, closed, then opened again, but no words came. His authority had evaporated, stripped bare in front of everyone. The teller gripped the desk to steady herself. Her bravado had dissolved, hands trembling as she realized every insult, every dismissal, was now on record against the man who signed her paycheck. The guard took a full step back, lowering his radio as if it burned. He mumbled, I didn't know. The gray blazer woman, the one who had smirked the loudest, now stood frozen. Her arms uncrossed slowly, her confidence draining. She whispered almost to herself, I mocked the owner. Around them, customers reacted. One man clapped, sharp and defiant, the sound cracking the silence. Another joined, then another. Soon the applause rippled across the room. It wasn't polite. It was fierce justice in the form of sound. Keith grinned into his phone, whispering, Everyone's seeing this. Thousands are watching live. Bah. The young woman with the handbag turned to Marcus, her voice clear, almost reverent. You didn't have to say a word. They exposed themselves. Marcus didn't acknowledge the clapping. His face remained calm, unreadable. He had seen this collapse before. Power built on prejudice always crumbled the moment truth walked in. The manager finally found his voice, but it cracked. Sir Mr. Reed, we can fix this. Marcus turned his eyes on him, cold and steady. You can't fix what you chose to break. The teller shook her head, voice weak. I didn't know who you were. Marcus replied without raising his tone. That's the point. You treated me this way because you thought I was no one. Gasps followed, louder than before. The applause grew again, this time joined by cheers. Phones swung to capture every angle, the staff pale and trembling, the customers clapping and shouting. The live-stream chat exploded. This is history. They're done. I can't believe I'm seeing this live. The branch, once their stage of humiliation, had flipped. Now it was Marcus's courtroom, and the verdict was being delivered not with gavel or law, but with exposure, with witnesses, with undeniable truth. The staff stood hollow, their power drained. The customers stood fierce, their applause relentless. And Marcus stood still, calm as stone, the quiet center of a storm he had never needed to raise his voice to command. The applause faded into a tense hush, all eyes returning to Marcus. He stood tall, phone still in hand, his silence pressing heavier than any raised voice. Then he spoke, steady and cold. Terminate the branch team. Effective immediately. The words landed like a hammer. On the other end of the call, the crisp voice responded without hesitation. Confirmed. Executing termination protocol. Stand by. The manager blinked, disbelief twisting his features. Wait, you can't. But before he could finish, a chime rang from the badge clipped to his belt. The light flashed red. He tapped it once, twice, panic creeping in. Nothing. Access denied. The teller's badge buzzed next, a dull tone echoing in the quiet lobby. Her screen froze, the login window flashing, revoked. She gasped, pressing keys with frantic fingers, but the system locked her out, irreversible. The guard's radio crackled, a digital voice repeating, Access suspended. Security ID invalid. He lowered it slowly, stunned. Gasps filled the room. A woman near the velvet rope whispered, He just erased them. Keith's live stream captured it all. You're watching this live, he narrated breathlessly. Their badges are turning red. He's firing them right here. The manager slammed his useless badge on the counter, voice breaking. This is insane. You can't just... Marcus cut in, sharp and precise. I can, and I did. The teller's eyes filled with tears. Please, I didn't know. Marcus's gaze stayed firm. You knew enough. You knew what respect looked like. You chose not to give it. The crowd erupted half with applause, half with shocked whispers. One man shook his head, muttering, "Justice. Real justice." The gray blazer woman backed toward the door, her earlier smirk now a mask of regret. She whispered, almost trembling, "He really owns everything." The young woman with the handbag stepped closer, eyes locked on Marcus. "You didn't have to shout once. That's real power." Marcus lowered his phone, his final command echoing in the stunned silence. "Escort them out." Not him, them. Two corporate security officers in suits entered through the glass doors, as if summoned by the very weight of his authority. They didn't look at Marcus. They walked straight to the manager and teller, asking for their badges. The staff resisted, protesting weakly, but the officers didn't argue. They simply collected the badges, their movements efficient, final. The crowd clapped again, louder, fiercer justice unfolding in real time. And Marcus remained still, unshaken, the calm eye of a storm he had orchestrated with nothing but silence and certainty. The red badges sat lifeless on the counter. The manager's hands trembled as security guided him toward the door. The teller followed, pale and silent, her earlier defiance gone. The crowd parted, not with respect, but with relief, watching injustice leave the room in handcuffs of consequence. The applause surged again, louder, freer, phones tilted higher. Keith's live stream chat scrolled so fast it blurred. "Justice served. Silent power. This is history." Marcus didn't move until the last dismissed staffer disappeared through the glass doors. Only then did he step forward, eyes sweeping the room, his voice rising for the first time not in anger, but in clarity. "The problem was never your doubt of my wealth," he said, every syllable measured. "The problem is how you treat people you think don't matter." The room stilled. No one shifted. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. "You thought my clothes decided my worth. You thought silence meant submission. And you called me a fraud in a bank I own." His tone sharpened, precise, unforgettable. "That was your last mistake." Gasps cut through the crowd. A woman near the back clapped once, firm, and the sound rolled outward, joined by others until the lobby shook with applause again. Marcus let it build, let it wash through the marble and glass. Then he raised a hand, and the noise softened into silence. "I didn't need cameras," he continued. "I didn't need applause. I didn't need to prove myself, because dignity isn't something you grant. It's something I already have." The young woman with the handbag nodded, her voice trembling as she echoed, "Yes." Marcus's gaze swept the phones, the faces, the silent witnesses now turned believers. "Remember this moment, not because I'm a CEO, not because I own this bank, but because the next time you see someone you think doesn't belong, you'll know better." The words dropped heavy, final. For a heartbeat, silence reigned. Then the crowd erupted once more, not just in applause, but in cheers, in shouts of agreement, in voices rising together. Keith turned his phone back on himself, eyes wide, voice trembling. "That's it. That's the message." He didn't shout once. He just flipped the whole system in 7 minutes. Marcus gathered his folder, now neatly stacked once more. He turned toward the doors, his stride unhurried, unbothered, as if the storm had never touched him. But every person in that lobby knew it had, and that he had mastered it. Just before stepping outside, he glanced back one final time. His words carried across the lobby, sharp as a blade, soft as a truth no one could deny. "I am not the result of your prejudice. I am the result of my power." And with that, Marcus Reed walked out, calm, silent, untouchable. The crowd stood in awe. The live stream raged on, and the branch that once tried to erase him would never forget his name again.